The note was crumpled and half-soaked from a spilled coffee, abandoned on the kitchen counter like garbage. I'm done pretending. Taking what's mine. The house is already listed. Don't bother calling. Vanessa hadn't even bothered with proper paper. She'd scribbled it on the back of a receipt from a gas station. I stood in the doorway, keys still in hand, staring at the ugly words. The late afternoon light cut across the floor like a blade, sharp and cold. There should have been panic, fury, grief. But what welled up inside me instead was something colder, cleaner, satisfaction. My name is Liam Carter, and at 39, I know what it feels like to lose, to watch something you built crumble overnight. But this wasn't loss. This was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Vanessa thought she could pull the rug out from under me, thought she could humiliate me, strip me down to nothing. What she didn't know was that the foundation she assumed we shared was already gone. And the new one, the one I'd built quietly and methodically, didn't include her. She had set her trap. I had already dismantled it. I set the note down carefully, almost tenderly, as if preserving it for evidence. It was fitting that her betrayal was as lazy as the lies she'd been telling for months. A house she couldn't sell, money she couldn't reach, a husband who wasn't the fool she thought he was. I pulled out my phone and tapped a message to Eric, my lawyer. It's happening. Time to move. No fear. No hesitation. Vanessa had started the fire. I was already standing outside the blaze, ready to watch it burn. It started small, almost invisible. A missed dinner here, a strange transaction there. Vanessa had always been busy with her consulting firm, but now there were entire weekends when she would disappear under the excuse of client emergencies. I wanted to believe her at first. That's the mistake, isn't it? You trust because you think loyalty is a shared language. But one night, while paying bills, I noticed money missing from our joint account. When I asked, she brushed it off. Business expenses, you wouldn't understand. That was when the doubt took root. Doubt turned into suspicion faster than I liked to admit. I started keeping records. At first, it felt like betrayal, snooping through our own bank statements, tracking her location, but the evidence piled up without mercy. Vanessa had opened new accounts, transferred money out steadily, and her late-night calls ended the moment I entered the room. Once, I drove past her office on a Saturday. She swore the building was dark, not a car in sight. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, the final shreds of denial slipping through my fingers. I needed allies, someone who wouldn't just pat me on the back and say it was probably nothing. That's when I called Eric. We had been best friends since college, and now he was one of the sharpest divorce lawyers in the city. Over a few beers, I laid out everything I had found. Eric didn't sugarcoat it. She's getting ready to jump ship, Liam. You need to lock things down. I moved money in small amounts, small enough that Vanessa's greedy eyes wouldn't notice until it was too late. 1 week later, my sister Claire confirmed my worst fears. She worked at a local credit union where Vanessa had opened 2 new private accounts with large, suspicious deposits. Claire's face was pale when she told me, "She's siphoning Liam, preparing for something big. You need to protect yourself." I didn't hesitate. I called the renovation contractor we had worked with earlier that year and arranged for a refinancing meeting without telling Vanessa the full details. When the paperwork arrived, Vanessa had been too busy with her supposed clients to read a single word before signing the power of attorney over to me. By the time summer rolled around, everything was in place. The house title was in my name, my savings were secure. Every shady move Vanessa made was documented in neat, dated folders. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about making sure that when she finally struck, I wouldn't be the one left bleeding. I even hired a private investigator, someone discreet. The photos he sent me from Vegas, Vanessa arm in arm with a man I'd never seen, were the final nails in the coffin. Love wasn't dead. It was murdered by betrayal. And through it all, I said nothing, played the role of the clueless husband, smiled at the right moments, let her think she was smarter, faster, untouchable. She never suspected a thing. I wasn't just ready for her to leave, I was practically holding the door open. When I walked into the kitchen that afternoon and saw her coward's note, I didn't need time to process it. I had already processed it months ago. Vanessa was playing checkers while I'd been setting up the chessboard. Every move she made now, I had already anticipated. And she was trapped. Claire called me 2 weeks before Vanessa left. I still remember the edge in her voice as she said, "Liam, it's worse than we thought." She had stumbled across a flagged alert from Vanessa's accounts. Not just withdrawals this time, but large outgoing wire transfers to an account overseas. Offshore hiding. It wasn't subtle anymore. It was desperate. My stomach turned, but outwardly I stayed calm. Every instinct in me screamed that a storm was coming. Claire's final words before she hung up stayed with me. Whatever you're planning to do, you need to be ready. So Eric and I met the next day in a quiet, out-of-the-way diner. Over greasy coffee and stale fries, he laid out the final phase of the plan. The evidence we had was damning. Money laundering attempts, asset concealment, breach of marital trust. We weren't just talking about divorce anymore. We were talking about criminal financial misconduct. "The court won't look kindly on this," Eric said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were draft petitions, bank subpoenas ready to file, and asset protection orders. One signature from me, and Vanessa's house of cards would collapse. I didn't hesitate. At home, I played my part perfectly. Vanessa returned from another conference, flush with excitement and suspiciously expensive new clothes. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. I kissed her back. I asked about her trip. I listened as she lied to my face. It took everything I had not to throw the evidence down on the table right then and there. But timing mattered. Eric had warned me, let her think she's winning. Let her make one final, arrogant mistake. Only then could we move decisively. Only then could I take everything back. Meanwhile, I set up safeguards. My woodworking business accounts were now independent and locked down, passwords changed, ownership documents secured, clients notified privately. I wasn't just preparing for survival, I was planning to thrive once she was gone. It was exhausting. The pretending, every smile felt like it stretched my skin too tight. Every casual conversation felt like a performance, but I reminded myself daily, this is temporary, endure a little longer. She thinks you're asleep at the wheel, let her think it. The quieter I stayed, the harder she would crash when the truth came. The night before I found the note, I barely slept. Some part of me knew it was coming. Vanessa had grown careless, smug. She started treating me with thinly veiled contempt, as if I were nothing more than a burden she was soon to shed. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, not sad, not scared, just waiting. When morning came and I found her goodbye scrawl on the counter, I wasn't surprised. I didn't chase. I didn't call. Instead, I texted Eric 3 simple words. It's time. Strike everything. And, just like that, the real game began. By noon the next day, Trevor, the real estate agent, left me a voicemail filled with awkward apologies. Apparently, Vanessa had stormed into his office, demanding the house be listed immediately, boasting that the paperwork was already handled. When Trevor did his due diligence, though, he found something Vanessa hadn't expected. The deed was solely in my name, no co-ownership, no shared claim. I called him back, my tone deliberately calm. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said. "I never authorized any sale, and no papers will be signed." Trevor sounded relieved. He didn't want to be dragged into our mess. Minutes after I hung up, Vanessa's first text came through. "Called Trevor, signed the sale documents. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." No hello, no explanation, just commands, as if I were a piece she could still move around the board. I didn't reply. I let her stew. Over the next few hours, more texts arrived, each one angrier than the last. She accused me of being childish, vindictive, even pathetic. I sat at my workbench, sanding a slab of oak, letting the messages pile up like junk mail. Every word she sent gave me more leverage. By evening, Vanessa called directly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Every call, every text was logged, every threat stored neatly away. Eric had advised me, let her dig her own grave. You just document everything. So I did. When the doorbell rang and I saw her standing there, furious, wild-eyed, I felt nothing. No fear, no sadness, just cold, surgical detachment. She pushed her way inside, ranting about betrayal, accusing me. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply pointed toward the door. You need to leave, Vanessa. This isn't your house anymore. Her face twisted, confusion flickering behind the rage. You think you can beat me at my own game? She spat. I smiled then, a slow, deliberate thing. It was never your game to begin with, I said, as she stood there, trembling with frustration. It finally sank in. She had no control left, no leverage, nothing to bargain with. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I locked it behind her, savoring the solid click of the deadbolt. The queen had tried to move against the king and lost. Vanessa showed up again the next morning, earlier this time, pounding on the door like she owned the place. I let her knock for a full minute before opening it. She barged in without an invitation, her face twisted with barely contained fury. You think you're clever, she snapped. Trevor won't list the house because of some technicality. Sign the damn papers, Liam. I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, feeling no urgency. It's not a technicality, I said calmly. You signed over your rights to the property months ago. You don't own a square inch of this place. For the first time, real confusion cracked through her anger. She blinked, shaking her head as if trying to clear it. That's impossible. We own everything jointly, she insisted, voice rising. I walked over to the credenza by the door, pulled out a thick folder, and dropped it on the coffee table with a satisfying thud. Not anymore, I said. You remember the refinancing documents? The ones you couldn't be bothered to read because you had a client dinner? You handed me full ownership on a silver platter. Maybe next time, read before you sign. Her mouth opened and closed. When she finally found her voice, it came out shrill and desperate. You tricked me, she accused, jabbing a finger at me. I didn't even blink. No, I said, voice low. You underestimated me. There's a difference. I opened the folder and pulled out bank statements, laying them in a neat row on the coffee table. Do you really want to keep pretending you're the victim here? Vanessa's eyes darted over the papers, her face draining of color with each damning number. Her anger was evaporating, leaving only fear. She tried another tactic, a softer one. Liam, listen, she said, stepping closer. We can work this out. I was just scared. We've built so much together. Her voice shook with fake emotion, but it was too late for that. I shook my head slowly. No, Vanessa, you built nothing. You stole, you lied, and now you're facing the consequences. I slid one final document across the table. A letter, drafted by Eric, notifying her of the official divorce proceedings and the lawsuit for financial misconduct. You'll be hearing from my attorney soon. Save your speeches for court. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then the mask cracked. She grabbed the edge of the coffee table and flipped it with a roar, scattering the papers. It was a tantrum, raw and childish. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I simply stared at her, letting her see the man she no longer controlled. Her breathing was ragged, her hands trembling. When she finally spoke again, Her voice was small. I knelt, calmly gathering the scattered documents, stacking them neatly again. You should have thought about that before you gambled it away. I pointed to the door. Leave, Vanessa, now. And the next time you come back here, it better be with your lawyer present. She hesitated, defiant, for half a heartbeat, but the fight was gone from her eyes. She walked out without another word, shoulders slumped, the door slamming shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the heavy silence. For years, she had made me doubt my worth, made me shrink myself to fit the space she allowed, but not anymore. I was done playing small. I wasn't just surviving this, I was winning. Eric didn't waste time. Less than 24 hours after Vanessa stormed out, the court filings were in motion. Divorce papers citing financial misconduct, asset protection orders, and a formal request to freeze her accounts all hit her like a barrage. The moment the subpoenas landed, Claire called me, laughing under her breath. You should have seen the panic when the bank froze her cards, she said. Vanessa's attempts to drain what little was left had been cut off at the knees. She wasn't just losing the house, she was about to lose access to every dime she had hidden away. The messages started almost immediately. Vanessa went from enraged to pleading in the span of 2 days. She called, texted, even emailed me long, rambling paragraphs about how we could still fix this, about how much history we shared. I didn't respond. Every desperate attempt she made was recorded and forwarded straight to Eric. I wasn't interested in apologies or explanations. She hadn't been sorry when she was siphoning our accounts dry. She was only sorry now that the consequences were real. There was a kind of brutal clarity in watching her unravel under the weight of her own schemes. Our first hearing came faster than expected. Eric presented our evidence in neat, lethal order. Bank statements, private investigator reports, real estate documents, communication logs. Vanessa's lawyer, a slick, overconfident type, tried to paint her as a victim of miscommunication, but the judge wasn't buying it. Her financial misconduct was laid bare in black and white. She had no defense left. The court froze her personal assets, issued an emergency injunction on her remaining accounts, and set an aggressive timeline for the divorce proceedings. Vanessa left the courthouse pale and shaking, while Eric simply gave me a satisfied nod. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking, in a cold sweat. No more pretending, no more scrambling to fix what she had been quietly sabotaging. I stood on my back porch, a glass of bourbon in hand, looking out over the property that was now indisputably mine. Vanessa had thrown everything she had at me, and instead of breaking, I had built something stronger, something she would never be able to touch. The weeks that followed were a blur of small, deliberate victories. I tore through the house like a man on a mission, stripping away every trace of Vanessa's influence. The sterile, neutral colors she had insisted on were replaced with warm, earthly tones. Her pristine guest room became my full woodworking studio, complete with the antique workbench I'd dreamed of owning. Every nail I hammered, every coat of paint I rolled. This was no longer our house. It was mine, built by my hands, my choices, my freedom. This business thrived in a way I hadn't seen in years. Without her draining resources or undermining my confidence, I finally had the space to expand. New clients found me through word of mouth, impressed by the craftsmanship Vanessa used to dismiss as a cute little hobby. Orders poured in for custom furniture, and soon I was hiring 2 apprentices to help manage the workload. The house that she had tried to sell out from under me now doubled as my brand's headquarters. Every creak of the floors, every scent of fresh wood reminded me that this time I was building something that no one could steal. Friends I hadn't seen in months, real friends, the ones she hadn't driven off, started drifting back into my life. Claire visited often, bringing fresh ideas and a bottle of wine when the paperwork got too overwhelming. Eric stayed close too, making sure every legal angle was covered, but also reminding me to celebrate the wins. Life didn't snap back into place overnight, but piece by piece, it rebuilt itself stronger than before. I was no longer a man patching over old wounds. I was forging something new, something permanent. Vanessa was a ghost now. I was the one still standing. 6 months after Vanessa walked out, I found myself standing at the entrance of a grand local artisan gala, something I would have skipped in the past, claiming I was too busy or too tired. Truth was, I had let myself shrink to fit the life Vanessa wanted. Not anymore. I wore a crisp black shirt and custom-made cufflinks from my own workshop. The ballroom was full of creative energy. Woodworkers, metal sculptors, glass blowers. These were my people now. As I moved through the room, I caught glimpses of old acquaintances who nodded with a different kind of respect, no longer seeing me as just someone's husband tagging along. It was near the wine table that I met Isabel, a ceramist whose handcrafted pottery had earned a quiet but growing reputation. She spoke with a warmth and authenticity that cut through the usual small talk. We compared notes about running small businesses, about dealing with skeptics, about turning passion into livelihood. She didn't look at my work and call it cute. She asked about grain choices and finishes like someone who understood craft at a soul-deep level. It wasn't a romance, not yet, but it was something rarer, genuine connection, a reminder that the future wasn't just surviving, it was wide open. A few weeks later, while organizing my office, I found the crumpled note Vanessa had left behind, still stained with coffee, still ugly and careless. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Instead, I tucked it into the back of my desk drawer, not as a wound, but as a marker. A reminder of how far I had come. Once her words might have destroyed me. Now, they couldn't even touch me. I had built a life that was fully, entirely mine. Every scar, every betrayal had been melted down and reforged into something stronger, something unbreakable. Looking out over my backyard, the one she tried to sell, without a second thought, I felt nothing but peace. The workshop hummed with new projects, my hands stained with sawdust and promise. There were no chains on me anymore, no whispered doubts eroding my worth. I had trusted my instincts, trusted my strength, and it had carried me farther than I ever imagined. The life I was living now wasn't the aftermath of her betrayal, it was the reward for my perseverance. Vanessa was a closed chapter. I was already halfway through writing a far better story. Liam's story teaches a powerful lesson. Strength isn't found in revenge or in reacting with rage. Truth strength is built quietly, deliberately, through preparation, patience, and self-respect. When betrayal comes, and sometimes it will, it doesn't have to break you. It can sharpen you, strip away what was never real, and leave behind someone stronger, wiser, and fully in control of their own future. If you take anything from Liam's journey, let it be this: protect your dreams, trust your instincts, never allow anyone to diminish the value of your work, your worth, or your voice. The best revenge is not anger, it's thriving on your own terms. If this story resonated with you, or if you believe someone you know needs to hear it, please like, subscribe, and share. Help spread the message that even in the darkest betrayals, there is a way to rise. Your support helps us tell more stories of resilience, strength, and new beginnings. Let's keep building a community where every setback can become a turning point towards something better. Stay strong, stay sharp, and remember, the game isn't over until you decide it is.